Know me, I'm Bob Wolf, and I chair the Spice Committee. On behalf of all the Spice Committee and the Programs Subcommittee, I'd like to welcome you to the second Spice program of 2021. Especially would like to make a shout out to Nancy Glass and Stephen Pinckney and all the members of the Program Subcommittee for the great work they do in bringing us such a diverse and interesting set of programs. And please feel free to send any program suggestions you have to Nancy Glass, and try and write this down quickly while I'm saying it. I'll repeat it maybe at the end of the program. nancyglass39@gmail.com. That's NANCYGLASS39@gmail.com. Also want to thank Tracy Lederer and Natalie Friedlander, as well as Andy Harkavy for their great support for Spice's efforts. Without them, we couldn't do anything. Today, we're proud to welcome Rabbi Beth Nichols, Temple Bethel's Director of Lifelong Learning, to her first, but assuredly not her last Spice program. And today she's going to talk to us about the Star of David, a complicated history. The only thing I know about the Star of David was what Mel Brooks, as a 2,000-year-old man, said. It was so hard to make that 3 points and 3 points and put them together, whereas the cross was just two pieces of wood and a nail, and that's why Christianity survived beyond Judaism. So I hope I didn't spoil your entire presentation, Rabbi, but we're looking forward to it. And a reminder, the next Spice program is going to be Wednesday, February 3rd at 11 a.m. via Zoom, where we'll all join Frank Dominguez, who's the General Manager and Content Director of WDAV Classic Musical in Charlotte, as he presents a lively, and I repeat, lively program on Latin, Cuban, and Sephardic music. And that's Ole and Oy vey, I guess. Spice doesn't run itself. It runs on the dedication, creativity, industriousness of our Spice Committee and its subcommittees. And if you'd like to join in and help take Spice forward into new and exciting horizons, please volunteer to join our Spice Committee. We're currently putting together our slate of nominations for the 2021-2023 term. Just a note, you need to be a Temple member to join the Spice Committee itself. However, the Spice Committee doesn't do all of the work in unison, and a great deal of the work is done by its subcommittees. And you do not have to be a member of the Spice Committee nor a member of Temple to join in and work on those subcommittees. So those include communications, engagement, potluck dinner, programming, SAGE, senior to senior, Sterling Elementary, and more. So now is the perfect time to take your participation to the next level, contribute, and have the satisfaction of being an integral part of Spice's ongoing success. If you're interested, and we are trying to close this out fairly quickly, so please contact me as soon as you can at bobw1945@bellsouth.net. I repeat, and I'll repeat it again at the end of the meeting, bobw1945@bellsouth.net. Just a couple of quick notes of what else is going around the Temple. SAGE kicks off on Wednesday, January 27th, which is next week, led by Rabbi Knight, and this year's topic is combating the machinery of hate, anti-Semitism, and us. Thanks to unprecedented interest, we've reached our goals for participation. So this year, we have closed the registration for that. But many thanks to Harry Cronson and his subcommittee for the great work they've done in putting this great program together. Very timely, as you know, from all the other things that are going on around town and around Temple about anti-Semitism. The 2021 Comparative Religion, The Paths of Healing, started the night before last and continues for 3 more Tuesdays. It's not too late to join that, and you can register on the Temple website. Due to your generosity, the Spice Fall Food Drive for JFS was a significant success. We collected over 60 bundles of food, and I think it was over $800 or $900. Some of the checks went directly to JFS, so maybe more than that. And I want to thank Nadine Fox and her team for their unstinting efforts, and to say that we're also pleased to announce that the second Spice Food Drive for JFS is on for Thursday, March 18th, this time for Passover. Please help Metrolina Jews who have food insufficiencies enjoy their Passover as well. We'll give you more information on this shortly when we solidify it. Now, it's my pleasure to go to Nancy Glass, who will introduce Rabbi Nichols.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Rabbi Beth Nichols enjoys the dual role of designing innovative Jewish educational opportunities and serving as a member of the clergy team. Oh, excuse me, my Zuzu would like to be part of this meeting. Zuzu, over there, sorry. She values the opportunity to develop long-term relationships with kids while partnering with parents to support the development, and especially enjoys working with teenagers who call her RBN. Rabbi Nichols grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, attended Amherst College, and graduated summa cum laude with a BA in religion and psychology in 2001. She was ordained in 2007 at the Los Angeles campus of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, where she completed her Master of Arts in Jewish Education. She most recently served for 13 years as Director of Congregational Learning at Temple Israel of New Rochelle, New York, where she oversaw educational programs for all ages. I learned that she also is an amazing woodworker. We are so pleased to have her with us today.
Nancy, thank you so much. I am thrilled to be here as well and to be learning and studying with you. I am going to start us off with a little quiz. So I'm going to invite you to grab a pencil or a pen. I promise you won't have to tell us how you did on our quiz, but it is easier if you can write things down. I'm going to show you 10 different images. And I want to ask you to just jot down what you think they are. They all include a 6-pointed star, and the answers will be revealed, I promise, at the end. Okay, so here is our first image. So if you want to just jot down what you think this is a picture of. Here is our second image. You can see the 6-pointed star in the center. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. This one I hope everyone will get. Number 7. Number 8. Number 9. And the last one, number 10. Before I move to our answers, the 6-pointed star, otherwise known as a hexagram. So a hexagon would be 6-sided, but a hexagram is 6-pointed. is a symbol that is really used throughout history by many different peoples. It has been used by Jews for hundreds and hundreds of years, but was a symbol being used at the same time by other people. So it was seen as a symbol, but not as a specifically or exclusively Jewish symbol. So if we go over our 10 images, our first image here is the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. So this is the main dome, and it was built between 1920 and 1926. So a Catholic dome with the 6-pointed stars around the outside of it. Our second image was a Roman plate discovered in England, made sometime between the 1st and 4th centuries. So while Jews certainly existed during those centuries, this is not thought to have been from a Jewish group, but from Roman invasion of England at that time. Number 3 is from your dollar bill. So if you don't believe me, you can take one out of your wallet. It is the area above the eagle on the dollar bill, and the 5-pointed stars are in the shape of a 6-pointed star above that eagle. This one is an Episcopal throne found in Italy from the 12th or 13th century, with both the large 6-pointed star and other stars around it, up over where the head of the person would have been sitting. This is in the 14th century, a Franciscan friar drew a map of Europe and labeled it with flags, and many of the flags used a 6-pointed star in them. This was the flag that he designated as the flag for the Poland area. So not at all a Jewish reference, but claiming that this was the flag that Poland was using as their flag at this time. We're not sure how accurate his map is, as other maps from the similar period have some similarities, but don't all overlap with their flags. This, of course, is an American sheriff's badge. This is a Jewish piece here. This is a 3rd century page on how to produce an amulet. So this includes an explanation of a magical formula that you can include on your amulet that would have protected you from certain evils. This is an 18th century reproduction of a 17th century flag of the Jewish community in Prague. So this is a specific example of a Jewish community being labeled and identified by a 6-pointed star. And it also included this hat in the middle of it. And there's differing understandings of whether the hat relates to a hat that Jews were made to wear at that time point, but it also resembles a hat that the Swedish army was wearing, and the Jews had a role in helping protect the community of Prague the century before from an invasion. So it was thought that they may have been rewarded with that image for their role. Number 9 is a 13th century Persian piece of pottery that can be found in the Smithsonian. While certainly there were Jews living in Persia long before this and through this period, this is not a specifically Jewish piece of pottery, just happens to be in the shape of a 6-pointed star. And number 10 is the national flag of the country of Burundi in Africa, and has 3 6-pointed stars on it. So you can see from these examples that the 6-pointed star is used by Jewish communities, but is certainly not exclusively a Jewish symbol, and for much of history was not thought of even as a predominantly Jewish symbol. So while it is now really associated as the symbol of the Jewish people, it was not that way for a long period of time. So I want us to think about what, if we can even count it as a symbol. So I brought you two definitions of symbols here. Erwin Goodenough, who was an expert in symbols and published specifically on Jewish symbols, writes that a symbol is an image or design with a significance to the one who uses it quite beyond its manifest content, or an object or a pattern which, whatever the reason may be, operates upon men and causes effect in them beyond mere recognition of what is literally presented in the given form. So a symbol means something beyond its literal content. Lawrence Hoffman, who is a professor at the Hebrew Union College, writes that a symbol includes the following qualities. It evokes its response automatically. Verbal descriptions of a symbol's significance is by definition superfluous and inadequate. In a ritual that deals with group experience, the symbol's significance must be shared by the members of the group. And true symbols are immediately apprehended and seem self-evident, so people hold to them with considerable emotional tenacity. So again, that a symbol has an automatic response, and that response and understanding of the symbol's significance is shared by a group of people. So it leads us to asking the question of whether the six-pointed star counts as a Jewish symbol. We have an answer by Gershom Scholem, who wrote what's really thought of as one of the definitive essays on the Magen David, the six-pointed star. And he says near the beginning of his essay, none of the marks of a true symbol apply to it. It expresses no idea, awakens no primeval associations which have become entwined with the roots of our experiences, and it does not spontaneously comprise any spiritual reality. It calls to mind nothing of biblical or rabbinical Judaism. It arouses no hopes. So I want to pause for a minute. I'm going to pause my sharing of my screen as well to invite some reactions to that idea. Do you agree that it doesn't provoke any emotions or hope or resonances with history for you? So feel free to, yeah, Bob.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I think it, especially since the state of Israel was formed, and that is in a sense part of its flag and it's a national symbol, that I think the Jews worldwide, that is a symbol, and to many others who look at it and see it as a Jewish symbol.
Right. Amalia.
Well, actually, I was going to say the same thing.
So that the state of Israel changed that. Great,
Right.
thank you. Anyone else? I can't see everyone, so if you are raising your hand, I might not be able to see you, so feel free to unmute and comment.
The star, Jewish people had to wear the yellow star during the Holocaust. So clearly, in my mind, it had to have been identified as Jewish before then.
Yes, great, and we will definitely get to that. Thank you.
People, when they see the Jewish star, automatically say, "Oh, you must be Jewish." And I wear a Jewish star, and it makes me feel good.
Yeah. So an
I
interesting
think-
I
question
want to
to,
add to what Brenda said, Rini Fernback,
yeah, Rini.
that yes, people are drawn to that and they automatically at least assume that they're Jewish. And I as a Jewish person sometimes see people who aren't Jewish and wear one, and I'll question them as to whether they know what it is or symbolizes. And I get interesting answers.
Well, and I think that there's this question too of if now we see it and we automatically associate it as Jewish, but does it symbolize something to us beyond itself? Is it saying something to us more than, oh, that must be something Jewish?
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi, throughout history, we have found, in an archaeological way, we have found artifacts that where we see the Star of David symbol on buildings and in documents throughout the ages, you know, from a very long time ago. And when we have archaeologists that, for example, have been doing investigations in Central and South America and even in Mexico, and gone through ancient indigenous villages, they have found indications that the Star of David is there, not, I don't want to say really ancient, but from the Middle Ages. And it's one of the things that has given us an indication that many Jews came over with the conquistadors from Spain and from Portugal.
Yeah. Okay.
So
So the challenge that I want to suggest, and then we'll move on to some of the other comments. The challenge that I want to suggest is that what we've seen from the use of the six-pointed star across cultures and not exclusively to the Jewish community is that finding a six-pointed star doesn't necessarily indicate that there were Jews present somewhere. And as soon as we get a couple more questions, I'll move on to just thinking about why is this symbol so powerful to anyone, not just to Jewish people. And I see Robert's PC has a question. You just have to unmute yourself.
We're calling it a Jewish star
Right,
rather
so-
than, you know, it can be a Star of David, but we're calling it in all the comments a Jewish star. It's Robert and Susan Weiss on his computer.
Thank you.
Rabbi, this
You're right. We're automatically calling it naturally a Star of David or a Jewish star, because for us, it definitely has that resonance of and meaning for and identifying it as something Jewish. Technically, we could call it, I guess, a hexagram or a six-pointed star if we wanted to reference it outside of the Jewish context. Janice?
So,
yes, when I was on a cruise, a person noticed mine, which I did start wearing before my conversion because I associated with Judaism. And so that's why I wore it before I was Jewish. But anyway, he noticed mine and he said that in our country, we call it the Star of David, but in actuality, it's the Shield of David. Magen David. He was from Israel.
Yes, so the Hebrew name of it is Magen David, the Shield of David. I'm going to share my screen again.
so let me
Stefan?
let's see. Let me comment from an Israeli point of view. So after the Holocaust, right before the establishment of the State of Israel, Jews were perceived to be weak and to be submissive. Israel wanted to create a different connection, to a historical connection of when Jews were strong, when Israel was an empire, and it connected it specifically to King David that stabilized the borders of Israel at the time, both Israel and Judea, and also defeated the Philistines, which were at that time the biggest enemy of Israel. So there was a great honor in that and connection to history. And I think that's how many Israelis look at it. That particularly the name David is very, very important, and the Shield of David.
Great, thank you, Stefan. So I want to back us up a little bit to before it became a Jewish symbol and just thinking about why it has been used across cultures for so long. So first I have a little prop. So you know what, let me actually pause my sharing for a moment so you can see me. A triangle is a classically strong symbol and strong shape used by many, many cultures. And I have some props to show you why. Here is our square, right? A square is flexible and can be squished. Whereas a triangle, you can't alter its size and its sides. They are fixed in their place. And that means that it is both, strong architecturally, but also strong for the purpose of symbolism. So you see triangles across ancient cultures referring to different things. So the six-pointed star, the hexagram, first we see it as two separate triangles, and having a point up and a point down also allows us and allowed many cultures to see it as signifying two opposing forces. So in Egypt, an upright triangle was symbolic of fire, while a downward triangle was symbolic of water. And putting them together, you then have that mixture of two elements together. The other piece of it is that it's thought of as the hexagram is thought of as a perfect shape. The triangles within a circle. If you've ever played around with a compass, you can draw yourself a Jewish star because the distance between each point is the same as the radius of the circle. So when you draw a circle with your compass and then use your compass, put one point on the outside of the circle and mark your radius, those are the points of the triangle. So it becomes this kind of perfect shape that would have been able to be created by people at a very early time. So we start to see this six-pointed star in many ancient cultures, definitely not having anything to do with Judaism, but just being used as a powerful shape. With the upside down and right side up triangles as well, it kind of represents forces. It became a symbol of protection as well, that it was kind of covering all the bases. So the six-pointed star came to be seen as a symbol that you could put on things as a way of protecting yourself. We mentioned a moment ago that the Hebrew name for it is a Magen David, and Magen is a shield. So there is an understanding by many people that the shield of David in battle must have been in the shape of a six-pointed star. Unfortunately, we have absolutely no evidence of that. It is unlikely that the shield had a six-pointed star on it. However, the idea of a magen, of a shield, is used repeatedly in biblical literature and in rabbinic literature to be a reference to God. So if you think of the end of our prayer, Avot v'imahot, part of the Amidah that we recite every time we have a service, it ends Magen Avraham, the shield of Abraham, referring to God. And there are other places where God is referred to as Magen David, the shield of David. So we're associating a shield with God, and that then gives this symbol of a six-pointed star. If we're calling it the shield of David, it gives it a resonance and a power connected to God, and is seen as protective. With all of these ideas of representing different forces and opposites, the six-pointed star becomes a symbol used often in amulets. So we saw that one amulet from medieval Jewish times, but also a six-pointed star was used in other amulets and magical practices as well. Amalia, I see your hand is up. Amalia?
It is not, sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. Stefan made the point to us that there was an importance to it being associated with David. So if you remember that David, it is thought that the Messiah will descend from the line of David. So having a shield of David also associates not only with God's protection, but also positive feelings about what is to come. So it has a messianic resonance as well. This timeline here on your screen gives you a sense, and I'm going to walk us through it, gives a sense of some of the times that we saw it used specifically in the Jewish community. And will tell us a little bit about give us more of a sense of how it is both a symbol that is used by Jews, but not necessarily only Jews for so much of its history. So in the year 135, Bar Kokhba, the Bar Kokhba revolt happened, and there was a brief period where Bar Kokhba was ruling, and they produced their own coins. And there is a six-pointed star. It's hard to know, though, whether it was a six-pointed star really being seen as a symbol of the Jews or actually a symbol of Bar Kokhba himself. Kochav is a star, so it may have just been a symbol, an individual symbol, symbolizing the leader and hero versus the people as a whole. In the 13th century, the six-pointed star is referred to not as the shield of David, but as the seal of Solomon. So King Solomon was known for having a ring that had the power to kind of keep away the demons. And for most of time, it was thought to be a pentagram, a five-pointed star. But in the 13th century, there is clear references to the seal of Solomon as a six-pointed star. But the thought is that calling the six-pointed star the seal of Solomon didn't really stick because David had so much more resonance for the Jewish community. While Solomon is, of course, a king who's celebrated, he doesn't have the same kind of hope and beauty of the Psalms that goes along with David, so that Magen David stuck more than connecting it with Solomon. In the 14th century, we have a contrast of the medieval European flags, one of which was in our original images, that include a six-pointed star and are referring to non-Jewish communities, but also the six-pointed star being used specifically in reference to a Jewish community. And we have that in the Prague community flag, that it was being used to represent the Jewish community specifically. In the 16th century, there are Jewish printer logos that incorporate the six-pointed star. And in 1656, this is an important year for this history, we find a border marker in Vienna that marked the border between the rest of the city and the Jewish ghetto. And it is the first time that we see evidence of a six-pointed star being specifically used with a cross. So one half of the border marker has a cross on it and one half has a Jewish star, and is indicating that this is the bulk of our city, the Christian city, and here is the border with the Jewish area. So that's the first time where we see the star and the cross being used kind of in an equal way, where now we would say that happens all the time, that a cross, oh, that's Christianity, and oh, the star, that's Judaism. This is the first time that we see it in 1656. There's thoughts that this piece in Vienna is actually what helped make the six-pointed star become known more as a Jewish symbol, because just 13 years later, the Vienna Jewish community is expelled and spreads out all over Europe, perhaps bringing with it an idea that this six-pointed star represents the community. By 1897, when the first Zionist Congress met, we get the creation of what became the flag of the State of Israel. There were a number of different versions suggested, but most, or if not all of them, involved a six-pointed star. And so here too, by 1897, we have a significant number of world Jewry acknowledging that the six-pointed star is a symbol for the community. What's interesting is that the Congress, the notes from these sessions of the Zionist Congress spend very little time talking about it. So there's not a debate about whether it's the right symbol or a discussion of whether it's Jewish or not. It just is there and is not really officially voted on for, I think, another 30 years. When it's kind of an afterthought at the end of a Zionist Congress, oh, we should actually say that this flag we've been using for 30 years is our official flag. What throws a wrench into our understanding of the six-pointed star as a Jewish star is World War I. During World War I, Americans and Germans were burying their dead under the sign of a six-pointed star. They're using that six-pointed star to indicate that it's a burial site of a Jewish soldier. But the French Jewish community protests and says that they are not going to use the six-pointed star because that doesn't represent the community, and in particular that the Algerian contingent of their army will have no idea what it represents. So this suggests to us that the six-pointed star has developed to a certain amount, a certain point in the world community as representing Jews, but that it really hasn't reached the entire Jewish community yet, and that it is not a universal symbol at this point. They preferred instead to use a symbol of the Ten Commandments. So we have then this association for some people very clearly that the six-pointed star represents Jews, and for others that it just is a symbol that is used. As mentioned earlier by someone in a question or in a comment, the yellow badges used by the Nazis unfortunately had a huge effect on cementing the six-pointed star as a symbol of Judaism. By having that as the label for Jews all over Europe, it really became a much more universal symbol for both Jews themselves as well as the people around them, that this was the symbol for Judaism. Which leads us then, of course, to 1948 and the adoption of the flag of Israel as it is known today, with the six-pointed star and the blue stripes, that really makes it a permanent fixture for the entire world that the six-pointed star is a Jewish star. I wanted to share with you one piece that adds some kind of meaning to the Jewish star, to the six-pointed star. One of the things that we saw at the beginning with the definition of symbols is that a symbol is supposed to represent something greater than itself. And Franz Rosenzweig, a Jewish theologian, wrote a book called The Star of Redemption in 1921, and he assigned representation to each of the points of our six-pointed star. So one triangle, he said, were the basic elements of existence: God, humanity, and the world. And the second star were the actions that those elements would participate in: creation, revelation, and redemption. When you put the two triangles together, you get his understanding of theology and how the world works. That God, through revelation, chooses humanity, that God, through creation, creates the world, and that humanity, through action and work, is able to bring redemption to the world. So it brings into kind of a diagram then Rosenzweig's understanding of how God and humanity kind of interact with each other in order to understand kind of the purpose of people in the world in relation to God. The question, though, I think that this raises for me is, does this add to the star's actual symbolic meaning, or is it just a helpful diagram to understand his theology? Because I don't think that people then look at the star and say, oh, just looking at that star reflects for me how God, humanity, and the world are interlaced with each other, right? It hasn't taken on that symbolic meaning that just kind of jumps out of the image. and instead might kind of add to our understanding, but doesn't kind of give it its symbolic meaning all by itself. Gershom Scholem was the author who said at the beginning that in his essay that it did not have any marks of a symbol, but this is how he concludes his essay. But far more than the Zionists have done to provide the shield of David with the sanctity of a genuine symbol has been done by those who made it for millions into a mark of shame and degradation. The yellow Jewish star as a sign of exclusion and ultimately of annihilation has accompanied the Jews on their path of humiliation and horror, of battle and heroic resistance. Under this sign, they were murdered. Under this sign, they came to Israel. If there is a fertile soil of historical experience from which symbols draw their meaning, it would seem to be given here. Some have been of the opinion that the sign which marked the way to annihilation and to the gas chambers should be replaced by a sign of life. But it is possible to think quite the opposite. The sign which in our own days has been sanctified by suffering and dread has become worthy of illuminating the path to life and reconstruction. Before ascending, the path led down into the abyss. There the symbol received its ultimate humiliation, and there it won its greatness. So I think he resolves in the end that the 20th century really gave the star its symbolic importance. And so it now fits that definition of a symbol, whereas for centuries, it was a universal symbol for so many that it was powerful, but not necessarily Jewish. And that the 20th century experience gave it both a negative, but then kind of life-giving symbolism for the Jewish people. I'm going to stop my screen sharing and invite comments and discussion on questions that you might have about what I've shared, or comments on how this changes or questions your attachment to the star. Amalia.
Just an interesting note. When the Israelis created the what is equal to the Red Cross, they didn't want to have a symbol of a cross on their ambulances, so they named the Israeli services Magen David Adom, Red David Star. So just an interesting point.
Yes, so and it's a great example of where the star is being used, right, in exact parallel to how the cross is being used. Other comments or questions?
Sarah, I see the star as a sign of remembrance also, from the past to the present. I also wonder, how did it become blue and white as the symbol, as the colors?
So the blue and white of what was the symbol for the Zionist movement and then became the flag of Israel came from the talit. The talit was traditionally blue and white, and that actually dates to biblical times when the color blue is discussed, and it's a very specific color of blue that was made from some kind of crustacean, the shell of a crustacean. So the blue and white, then the story goes, and I've read articles who say it might just be a story, but let's say it's history. The story goes that that they wanted to bring together this symbol and the talit as a way of saying that the talit was kind of always the flag of the Jewish people, and we could make it now into a flag of a nation. The contrast I think that's interesting is that the six-pointed star doesn't have a specifically kind of religious meaning in the same way that the cross does. So by having the combination of the talit and the star, you get both a kind of symbol of a people and a religious meaning together, which perhaps fits for the foundation of the state of Israel, that it is not a particularly kind of theological symbol in the same way that the cross is. Other comments?
Yes. Rabbi Steve Phillips, there is an Episcopal church at the corner of Tryon and 7th that has the Jewish star as a symbol on the outside of the building. And being new to Charlotte at that time, we thought, gee, isn't that a welcoming symbol? How wonderful they did that. Obviously now, after listening to you, it had nothing to do with Judaism. Do you know how it became a symbol of Episcopalianism? Because you also showed the chair, the Episcopal chair with the Jewish star.
Right. I think that you said you saw it in a stained glass window. Is that correct?
No,
Oh.
it
In
was
the brick.
in the brick.
Oh, in the brick. Interesting. Okay. Because I think it is more that it is not a specifically Christian symbol, but that it is a symbol used in a lot of decorative art, because it is that kind of perfect symbol of a triangle that fits inside of a circle. It is a pleasing creation that is easily made from the radius of the circle. So you find it a lot. And because the triangle also is strong, you see it a lot in things like, I'm not sure how this brick is formed, but you see it a lot in stained glass windows, that there are a lot of windows of churches that have a 6-pointed star in them, but it is a way that you can divide up a circle. One of the definitive books on this that I have found the most useful is the Magen David by Gunther Plaut. So the same Gunther Plaut who wrote the Torah commentary that we use at the synagogue. He wrote the book after being a chaplain in World War II and coming upon a German town where there was a stained glass window with a Jewish star on it that was a church. And he was really taken aback at how, in the middle of Germany, after all of this destruction, here was this Jewish star that had stayed whole, and realized that it wasn't a Jewish star, it was a window in a church, and decided that it was kind of his mission to figure out why. And discovered that really there were these 6-pointed stars all over the place in decor and of all different religions, and that in those cases it was really a pattern and a symbol and not a specifically religious symbol.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stefan,
Brenda Gale, and I just wanted to say that when I was in Italy, it was a beautiful, beautiful church, a big church. And there was a Jewish star right in the front on top. And the guide had told us that the architect was Jewish and he wanted to show his mark.
Huh. So it's interesting about whether, I wonder whether that is true, that the architect was Jewish and wanted to show his mark, or that people assume that because there's a 6-pointed star, there must be a Jewish connection. Interesting. Thank you, Brenda.
Rabbi-
I see a question,
Yes.
A comment in our chat about contrasting the Jewish star and the menorah. So this question of if it wasn't the Jewish star that was the symbol of the Jewish people, what other symbol would it be? Usually what comes up is the 7-branched menorah, and that is actually the seal of the state of Israel is a 7-branched menorah. That would have been the symbol that most prominently identified the Jewish people prior to the Jewish star taking its place. But some people feel that that it wasn't appropriate to keep the 7-branched menorah as the symbol because it really, for so many people, resonated with the destruction of the temple. And specifically, the carrying away of the menorah that's represented in the Arch of Titus in Rome, so that the menorah, while a symbol of God and the temple, also became a symbol of Jewish defeat. Stefan?
Yes, so I think about 25 years ago or so, there was actually an article in the Observer, Charlotte Observer, about the Jewish star on the Episcopal Church downtown. It's right around 7th Street by Discovery Place. You can see it from the street, from Tryon Street. And they actually did say that the community at the time that was building the church and the clergy, they did want a Jewish reference to create a Jewish connection and an acknowledgement of origin of Christianity in Judaism.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes, Sharon.
Yes, 4 years ago, I went on a tour of Lexington, Mississippi, which is where my great-grandparents settled. And when we were given a tour of the town, there were 2 churches that had the Star of David in either stained glass or in the very front archway of the building. And it was explained to us that those particular churches, and I can't remember what denominations now, were referencing the fact that they understood their religion grew out of Judaism. And I found it interesting that the synagogue did not feel comfortable putting a Jewish star outside until many years later.
Interesting, thank you. And it's interesting to think too that for churches today to have the symbol of the 6-pointed star indicate the origins of Christianity and Judaism, when the 6-pointed star would certainly not have been an image that Jesus would have seen as a symbol of his religion.
But they think more of the Old Testament, not Jesus necessarily.
Rabbi, in Prague in 1354, the Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bohemia, Charles IV, authorized the Jewish community of the Czech lands to bear a red flag that featured the Star of David. So the Jewish community of Prague then began to utilize that symbol as their official symbol. And then it spread through Europe. And in the 15th century, Budapest's Jewish community used a similar flag. So it was used that way and then became an architectural detail in the Middle Ages in Europe, in Central Europe.
Yeah, so the challenging piece, I think, of the history is that we have these pieces like you're suggesting of the star being specifically given to a Jewish community as a symbol, but that in other places at the same time, it wasn't recognized by communities as either specifically Jewish or was being used by them as a symbol, and they weren't Jewish. So it's this kind of gradual, I think, evolution of it from being seen by some small amounts of the community as specifically Jewish and representing their community, to how it spreads. So if you imagine from what you're telling us of this, of the flag of a specific community, right, that it slowly spreads. But to know that in World War I, the French community still didn't feel that it was a strong enough symbol, shows that it took a long time. And I think part of that time is the fact that it didn't have a particular symbolic meaning in terms of what it represented automatically, like the cross represents the cross that Jesus was killed on. It doesn't have that's the star that was the blank in this story. So it took a little longer for it to have that resonance.
Rabbi? Right. But what about the Zionist movement? Wasn't it adopted fairly early on with the Zionist movement as a symbol?
Yes, so by 1897, the Zionist movement had kind of unofficially made it its symbol and was on their banner. So I'm not sure if I don't know enough about the community at that point to say whether they would have seen it as a symbol of the Zionist movement, but not a symbol of Judaism as a whole.
The Zionist movement was but the Central European movements earlier that adopted it and used it as a flag, as it had been sort of imposed upon them initially, their culture was very different and almost diametrically opposed to that of the French. So for the French to adopt that symbol would be to accede to a certain extent to another culture that they were pretty opposed to, that indicated sort of a medieval rivalry, of different empires.
Thank you.
Rabbi, I also have
Margie?
a
Yes,
sorry.
I was
Yeah.
going to say that the church that Brenda referred to earlier, we were told on our tour of Italy that that church also had a Jewish architect who requested to be buried in the church. And I think, don't ask me what the name of the church was, but I think Michelangelo was buried inside that church. And the architect's wishes were to also be buried in the church. But when the church was completed, the Jewish star was so big that the people who hired him, I guess, got aggravated. And instead of being buried in the church, he was buried outside the church.
Huh.
And that was told to us by a Jewish guide from New York. So I kind of believe him. Yeah.
I have a comment on a different issue, which is, and that's what I thought Mr. Phillips was talking about. The Messianic group have also a big David star on their church. But what I saw the women wearing, which really sort of surprised me, was that they were the David star, and in the center there was a cross. About the Israeli symbol of the menorah, they wanted to make it a little bit different, so they put the olive branches on the sides, which really symbolized a dream of peace.
And it also then connects that 7-branch menorah to the image that the prophet Zechariah has in a dream of the 7-branched menorah with olive trees growing on either side. So it enabled the founders of the state of Israel to really try to take the image a little bit away from the negative perception of the destruction of the temple to a kind of, again, a messianic vision of the future of peace that could be promised.
Could I say something too?
Sure.
Bob Larrick? Thank you for this discussion. I'm sorry I got here late. But doesn't it bring up also exactly what you said, actually? And there is, I think, a Hope of Israel Messianic Church in off of Elm Street in Ballantyne. But the idea of a symbol and art and the symbol of the need to perfect our human condition and the polarization in Israel, even between Jews, or the polarization between Christians and everyone and everybody here, as well as Shiites and everybody else, brings up the need to continually to perfect our human condition. And isn't that a common concern of humanity? Art and symbols, words are symbols. How do we live together in the need for a messianic coming first or second?
Yeah, well, and Bob,
work for
I
peacefully
think,
is basically what I was working on the UN also, and using that as part of a symbol with a circle around it as a stronger humanity. And don't we need a more ethical, rational, humanistic, and healthier humanity?
I think that the power of symbols is what exactly what you're suggesting, that within a symbol you can, and why we have symbols is that one symbol can evoke feelings such as perfection and peace and the promise of the future for people. And which I think, to come back to the star, the idea of it being the shield of David, that David has this promise of the Messiah descending from his line, that we can see in that star then hope in its connection to David. I want to just to conclude, I want to raise one more point that I saw represented in our in the chat box, that another way of thinking of the two triangles is representing the two genders of male and female. And so again, then the star is bringing together opposites so that the star itself can symbolize a whole. And you know, I think in what Bob was saying about challenges and conflicts between people, that perhaps the star then can illustrate for us a promise of a wholeness for the Jewish people, and a coming together represented by the two triangles or the 6 points, but that they're coming together into one star. So I want to, it is 12 o'clock, so I want to, I think that was my time. So I want to thank everyone for participating in this conversation. And I don't know if I turn it back over to Bob or to Nancy for your next steps.